Hello, I'm Lucy from Colouring in the Midst of Madness, and today I am bringing you my comparison post of How to Draw Inky Wonderlands by Johanna Basford. Now this is the UK edition on the left and the US edition on the right. I will do my very best to keep them that way round throughout the video. There are a lot of differences. As most of you will know, I'm quite well known for doing these comparison posts, and I find heaps and heaps and heaps of differences. In the case of this book, I think I found 39, and most of them won't affect the enjoyment of the book. A few of them will. I will make a particular note of those as I go through. Lots of them are just changes and alterations in the publication process. So hopefully you won't mind me being too pedantic, but this is kind of what I do. And yeah, let's get started. So the first difference is the book size. Now these are lined up at the bottom, but as you can see the US edition is slightly larger at the top, and actually it's also larger on the side as well. This time the book is rectangular rather than square, and each edition is the same size as the other editions of Johanna's books from its own country. So the UK editions are 25 centimetres tall and the US editions are 25.5 centimetres tall. Now these are both identical in size pretty much to Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, which was also rectangular. Obviously it's slightly narrower than all of the square books, but it is the same height. So if you're wanting cohesiveness on your shelf, then you'll want to go for the same edition as you've previously gone for Johanna's titles. So number 2 is the cover design. Now this is a little bit tricky to see, but if you look down the edges, there are different amounts of the image showing on the different edges because of the difference in size of the book. So you can see that the US edition underneath is further down on the page than the UK edition at the bottom, and then there's much less of this fish showing here than there is here. Number 3 is the penguin logo. Now the books are published by 2 different publishers. So the UK edition is published by Virgin, and that has no logo, it's just got this little swirl in the seahorse's tummy. And the US edition is published by Penguin, and therefore up in this top right corner there's the little penguin logo. Number 4 is foiling colour. Now I'm hoping that you'll be able to see this in the light. There is a slightly different gold foiling used on the books. So the US edition is behind, and that has a slightly yellower gold, and the UK edition has a slightly sort of coppery, bronzier coloured gold. The US edition foil is also smoother than the UK edition, which is slightly rougher. In addition to this, there are different foiling aspects on the books. So the US edition has quite a lot less, and as I say, there are different aspects foiled when compared to the UK edition. So that was number 4 and 5. Number 6 is the coloured background. So this is a really easy way of identifying the books. The UK has this pink background, and the US edition has this lovely sort of duck egg blue background behind the title. Now number 7 is coloured accents, and as you can see on the UK edition there are little coloured accents all over the cover, and they are all pastel colours. On the US edition we've got different colours and completely different aspects coloured, and they're all limited to this bottom right hand corner. On the covers of both of them you can see that because it's a drawing book there are illustrations sort of copied in, I'm not explaining this well, but it looks like pencil, and this is much paler on the US edition compared to the UK edition. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down on my laptop because obviously I can't memorise all of this. So number 9 is spelling. Now obviously this is one of the big differences, and I know that it's something that bothers a lot of people because the UK and the US spell things differently even though both speak English. So on the front, in the subtitle, we've got the word colour. Now it has a U in the UK and no U in the US. Now obviously throughout the book, this is also the case. There are different spellings for the different editions because of the different use of language. Also, sometimes there are different words used, so things like autumn and fall, and candy and sweets. So there isn't a lot of that. I think I only noticed 3 or 4 examples, including those two. And obviously, oh no, sorry, that's spelling, but yeah, I noticed those. But if that bothers you, then obviously go with the edition of English that you're used to. But for most of everybody, it won't really matter. Right, number 10 is the blurb. So, as you can see, the blurb is different on the 2 books. There's far more information on the US copy, and there's information about Johanna's social media accounts, which is actually on one of the French flaps in the UK edition. There's also the cover colour, which I'm hoping is showing up on the camera. So the light isn't great at the moment, apologies for that. I couldn't do it during the day because we've had storms. But the UK edition, they're both white, but the UK edition is brighter white than the US edition, which it doesn't look like is showing up properly here, but you're just going to have to trust me. I will have taken photos for my comparison written post, and that will be linked to in the description as soon as that's up. So do check there, because I will have taken hundreds of photos, and there'll be much better colour in those. So this is a sort of slightly creamier colour, like you wouldn't call it cream, but it's a creamier white than the UK edition. These are also identical to the previous editions of each country, so they don't sort of look different on the shelf. They are the same as previous editions. We've also got an additional image on the US copy. Obviously you can see that there isn't one on the UK copy. You don't need to worry because the tutorials for all of these are in both books, so this is included in the UK copy even though it's not on the back at the moment. The other thing is that the images on this UK back cover are printed larger than the ones on this US copy. So, number 13, I don't think I'm keeping up with saying all of these numbers, apologies. So, number 13 is the spines. Now, most of Johanna's books, when they're printed in the UK, they have a black spine, and when they're printed in the US, they have a white spine. Now, this changed for Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, and as you can see, it's changed again for How to Draw Inky Wonderlands, and there's only a white spine. There are also differences because I've got the UK copy at the top here. There are foiling accents on here, which I'm hoping you can see. There are also different motifs on here, and we've got the different publishing logos. So we've got Virgin on the UK and Penguin on the US. The text is written much larger on the US edition, and Inky Wonderlands is written in italics on the UK edition. The next difference we've got is the binding. Now again, this does affect use. So the US copy at the top here is just glue bound. I'm just going to bring this up to the camera. So yeah, this is glue bound, and the UK copy is glue and string bound. Now I have had a lot of people get in touch with me about their US copies falling apart. And it has got to the point where I now pretty much recommend people get the UK copy because they're so miffed about pages falling out of their US copy. If you're planning on just using this as a reference book, then I don't think it will matter, but if you're planning on drawing in it, then I would definitely advise getting the UK copy because it will hold up much better to use. The next difference is the thickness. So I'm just going to line them up here. I'm hoping that you can see that they are different thicknesses. Now this is because of the paper, which I will talk about later, and this is the case with all of Johanna's books. The US copy is always thicker than the UK copy. This also then means that we come on to number 16, which is the weight. Now the UK edition weighs less than the US edition. So the US edition weighs 511 grams and the UK edition weighs 474. So that's a 37 gram difference. So the next thing is the dust jacket. Now normally the UK edition has a removable dust jacket, and for whatever reason there isn't one this time. Now I know a lot of us really like those, I personally do, so I'm always a bit saddened when we don't have one. However, when you're drawing in a book you do need to be able to kind of turn it whichever way, and so it does make a lot of sense to not have one, and it also makes the decision between the two a lot easier when you're not having to base it on making it match the other sets. So we'll go on to number 18, which is the French flaps. So I'll just open this up, and you can see that they both open up into French flaps. Now these are half French flaps, they then open out, and this whole thing is fully colourable in both. There's no waxy finish like there is on the insides of the removable dust jackets, so that's really nice, you can colour the whole thing. Now on the US edition we've got 2 images. Don't worry, the UK edition also has those, but it has one at the front and one at the back, whereas the US edition has them both at the front, and then at the back it's got this list of images of most of Johanna's previously published titles. So the next thing is the inside cover image. So let's just open this out so that I can show you. It is like musical books doing this. So I'm just going to show you over here that there is about 1 centimetre more image on the US edition when compared to what's printed on the UK edition, just because it's bigger. So I think they are printed at pretty much the same size, but because the book is bigger, obviously you get a bit more of the image on the US edition. So the next big thing, and this is probably the most crucial thing when deciding which book to get, is the paper. Now this is a bit of a lengthy bit, but I will try and give you all the information you need. So as you can see, they are different colours, they are also different thicknesses, they have different amounts of tooth, however they are both absolutely lovely papers, and they are the same as their own country's editions of all of the books by Johanna from Magical Jungle onwards. So if you have any of the UK editions of Magical Jungle, Johanna's Christmas, Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, World of Flowers, then this is the same paper as that, and that's the same to be said for the US editions, but they are not the same paper. So I'm just going to do the flick test. So you can hear they are different thicknesses, and as I showed you from the thickness of the spine, they are very different. They're both equally lovely with pencils. You can definitely get more layers on, sorry, don't know why I'm tapping that one. You can get more layers on the US one. And in terms of drawing, I found that pencil is much easier to erase from the US paper. However, I will just show you the test page at the back in both, because I've had a slight issue with the American paper and I don't quite know why. So my partner drew these 2 fishes and I drew these flowers and leaves, and I'm going to bring them up to the camera. So we've got the UK on the left and the US on the right, and I'm hoping that you can see that on the US flower I used the 0.1, 0.2 and 0.3 pigment liner pens by Staedtler, and the 0.2 was sort of spreading on the US paper, so I drew these exactly the same on these, and this is sort of what's happened. Now it's not dreadful, and it may well be user error, but I'm just going to turn this upside down so I can get it in shot. So now we've got the US on the left and the UK on the right. So Joe, my partner, did these fish, and actually he had the same issue. So I don't know if it's my pen or what, but it was a little bit dodgy. So if you're planning on drawing in the book, you might want to have a little think about which book you actually want to get, because personally I would be recommending the UK edition, because the pen just kind of went on a bit better. So number 21, we're back to the beginning of the book, and the title image size is much larger in the US edition. So I'm hoping that you can see that there is actually 1.5 centimetres difference in the height and the width of this image. So this is a fair bit bigger for like blending and shading and things like that. We then go on to the copyright page, which is number 22. So we're whizzing through, and the information, as you can see, there's completely different information on the two. There's far more information in the UK edition than the US edition. We also have different sort of size and orientation. So the US image is printed a little larger than the UK, but as you can see, it shows a different portion of the image in the books. Then we also have the printing location. So the US copies are printed in America and the UK copies are printed in China. Now the next thing is grammar. And yes, you better believe it that I'm pedantic about this. So the introduction pages are actually brilliant for showing this. Now these differences are consistent throughout the book, but actually it happens that they show up throughout the introduction page, so it's easiest to show you all of that here. So there are a number of grammatical differences between the two. So the first one is that there is different punctuation for quotes. So in the UK we've got apostrophes, and in the US we've got proper quotation marks. The next thing is that due to different text justification, the US edges often the word, sorry, my brain is just mush at the minute. My words are just leaving me. So at the end of quite a lot of the lines you can see that there are hyphens because the word travels onto the second line. Now they've avoided this in the UK edition, and this does remain throughout. I have no idea why this is the case. I personally don't like the way the US edition is done because I don't find it very easy to read across the lines when the words keep going over 2 lines. So I do prefer and find it easier to read the UK edition. But yeah, it was just something I noticed, that because of how it's justified differently, it does spread differently on the page, and therefore you end up with these hyphenated words. There's also dots, so we've got dots here and dots here, and as you can see there's actually a different number and completely different spacing, and that's the case with all of the punctuation dots throughout the books. We also have the use of Oxford commas, so we're looking here and here. Now an Oxford comma is where you have a list of 3 things and you have a comma before the and. So there are hardly any in the UK edition on the left, but there is one here in the US edition on the right. And finally, I'll just move this on top so that you can see. There are a number of places where words are written differently, and they're not spelled in a different way. They're just written differently. So sometimes they're written as 2 words, sometimes they're written as 1, and sometimes they're hyphenated, and this differs between the books. So one of these examples is the word straight away. So in the UK edition it's 2 words, and in the US edition it's 1. There are also various others, including face down, claw-like, megadoodle, and this example of straight away. But I think that's all the examples I found, so it's certainly not a lot. The final thing to show you on... oh no, not the final thing. The second to last thing to show you on this page, we're up to 26 now, is the tip. Now there are tips on lots of the pages, and the title is the same size as the text on the UK edition, and it's larger on the US edition, and it's also formatted slightly differently. So usually the tip takes up a bit more room on the US edition. And the final thing, we've got the UK edition at the bottom here, is the web address, and it's written in bold and on its own line in the US edition and not in the UK. So, number 28, and this is a really odd one, is we're actually missing a bit of text. So, on 2, and it's only 2 of the pages in the UK edition, we are missing the intro text up here. So it's on the Blooms page and the Ship Ahoy page. Now it's not absolutely crucial, especially the Ship Ahoy page. It doesn't sort of give you instructions as to what you need to be doing, so you're not missing out by not having it, so please don't let it put you off getting the UK edition. It was just something I noticed and I found it really, really strange. So I have no idea why those bits have been missed off. I have a feeling that they may get added back in future print runs. So these might be worth an absolute fortune, you never know. The Harry Potter with the typos in is worth thousands, so you might want to get your hands on one now. So number 29 is the grey circles. Now, as you can see, they are much darker in the UK edition than the US edition. There's much less contrast. But this also varies throughout, so they get a bit lighter partway through and then darker again. So I don't know what was going on with the grey ink at the UK factory, but it seemed to change, whereas it doesn't change at all in the US, and you can clearly see the first steps and then the last step in the grey. So number 30 is posies. Gosh, it's a good workout doing these. Right, so again, we've got something missing, but this time it's in the US edition. So if we're looking at this tip here, we've got one sentence missing, which again really isn't crucial. It's very obvious what you need to do, but the UK edition tells us to redraw in ink, adding details, then add a dark outline. And you don't have that on here. However, it's fairly obvious what you need to do, so I don't think that's an issue. The next thing is image size. So as ever, because the US edition is printed larger, well, it's a bigger book, some of the images, especially those that reach the edge or are full page images, they are printed a little larger. Now, because this mostly isn't a colouring book, it really doesn't matter, but if you have particularly poor vision or anything like that, then you might want to get the US copy just because it gives you a bit more wiggle room. So you can see that there is a difference in the size of this image. This isn't consistent throughout, and the biggest range is up to 1.5 centimetres in both directions. The next thing is the image layout and orientation. So again, as I've shown on some of the other things, there are sections of images when they reach the edge of the page where they are laid out differently. So I've got the UK edition on top, and you can see that this is printed in a really quite different orientation on the two different books. The next thing is the seaweed tangle page. Oh, and I will just show you that here, again, we're missing the text on the Ship Ahoy page in the UK edition. So you can see that there's a little bit of text there that we are missing. So, yes, number 33 is seaweed tangle. There we go. And we're looking at this little fish, which is placed much higher up on the US edition than the UK edition. Now the next thing is number 34, and that's on the seashells page. And in the UK edition, which I'll show you when I get to the correct page, there is mention of page numbers that are not mentioned in the US edition. Now, you don't need to worry because it's not actually particularly helpful. So it's mentioned just down here on the UK edition, and it's not up here. There are no page numbers in either book, so it's no benefit to you having mention of the page number. This happens twice in the book. It's on this page and the Woodland Garland page. But yeah, as I say, there's no page numbers, and they both mention the same technique, which is the heart technique, and it's very easy to find. So again, it's just a difference, but it doesn't affect things. So, number 35, we're going all the way to the back of the book. We are nearly done, so do stick with me. So, the UK edition is on the left and the US edition is on the right. As you can see, the text is laid out differently. Now, it is exactly the same information, but it's ordered differently, as well as being paragraphed differently. Right, we've then got page ink permanency. That's not easy to say. Now, this won't show up well, which is good because it means that the page ink is pretty permanent. So I've got the UK edition and the US edition, and we're looking at the word test on each page. Now I've sort of scrubbed over these with a Derwent burnisher and a Derwent blender, and as you can see there's absolutely no movement of pigment on the UK edition and very little movement of pigment on the US edition, and this is the same as the previous books. Again, because this isn't a colouring book, it doesn't really matter anyway, but I always test it, and so I have this time as well. So that comes to the differences, comes to the end of the differences with the books. The only other differences are, there are three more. The publication date. So the US edition publishes today, Tuesday the 15th of October, and the UK edition publishes on Thursday the 17th of October. Number 38 is availability. Now normally it's really easy to get hold of whichever edition you want, regardless of where you are. Unfortunately, this is not the case at the moment. I will be speaking to Johanna about this and trying to find out sort of what's happening and whether this will change, and I will of course update the information, so do check the description box. What normally happens is that you can get both on Amazon UK, Amazon US and Book Depository. At the moment, the only place that you can get the US edition is in the US. I am hoping that this will change, but at the minute it's only the UK edition on either of those, so you may be limited to having that because that's all you can get. However, of the two, I do think that I prefer the UK edition, just because the paper is better with the pens, and I personally do really like the paper in both, but I also really love this pink, and I can't remember if there's anything else, but I think they're both practically identical, so there isn't one that sort of shines brighter than the other, so whichever you end up with, I really personally don't think it matters. The final difference is not a difference between the books, but a difference between these and the previous books. There is no treasure hunt. I don't know if anybody's disappointed about that. I personally don't tend to look at the treasure hunt. I'm too busy colouring and just sitting open-mouthed in awe at the work. But there is no treasure hunt. However, you could of course draw your own. Once you've gone through the book and learned all of the beautiful techniques, you'll be able to draw your own in if you wish. So if you are upset, don't be upset because you can create your own. So I think we've come to the end. So yeah, the biggest difference is the size and the paper. Beyond that, there aren't any sort of crucial differences really, apart from sort of between these and the previous books. I absolutely love the book. I will be reviewing it very soon. And yeah, if you want to see photos of any of these differences, if you want to find out any more, then there'll be a link to my written post in the description box. And I will have photos of every single difference on there. And that takes absolutely ages, so it may not be up right when this video is, but do check back, it'll be up very soon. Yeah, please let me know in the comments what you think of the book and which edition you'll be getting and why. I'm always really intrigued to find out about that, and I do love to hear from you all. Please do give me a thumbs up if you've got this far. I'm so impressed if you have. And please do subscribe to my channel because I do a comparison post for every book by Johanna, and I will also be bringing out my reviews of these books, so I'll do one for each of the editions. Those will also be in written posts on my blog, and I might even do tutorials and things like that. I'm due to move house any minute, but after that I will be back with all sorts of content. So yeah, do give me a comment, do give me a thumbs up, do subscribe to my channel, and I will be back again soon. Thanks so much for watching.